You've been told if you keep your head down, work hard, and prove yourself, recognition, promotions, and opportunities will come. But let's be honest, that's just not true. This is Lead Without Limits, a podcast for professionals in multifamily and beyond who are ready to stop second-guessing themselves. Because leadership isn't just about titles or tactical skills. Yes, we'll cover those here, but real leadership starts from within. It's about changing the beliefs and behaviors that have kept you playing small and rewiring the thought patterns holding you back. I'm Shannon Bryant, a confidence and pattern expert, and this is the space where we talk real growth, real change, and maybe have a little workday humor along the way. This episode is brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network, delivering the latest news, ideas, and inspiration across the multifamily sector. If you're ready to lead without fear, lead without doubt, and lead without limits, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Okay, well, leadership can be pretty easy when everything's going great, but it's how you show up through life's toughest moments that can make all the difference. That's why I am so excited to introduce today's guest, Liesel Mertes. You are a workplace empathy expert, keynote speaker, and a champion for human-centered leadership. So if you've ever wondered how to bounce back from setbacks, support your team through hard times, you are in for an episode packed with inspiration today, actionable tips. I know you're going to bring all of the things and you're going to help me stop being commiserating Candace, right? That's it. Welcome.
It's good to be with you.
I'm so happy to have you here today. I have to tease you because you were on my podcast, my other podcast, Top Self, a while ago. And it was so chaotic for you at the time. I felt so bad, but you were still generous enough to come on the show, be a guest on the show, talk about empathy. And the move, everything was out of place. And so you had to record from your closet. Which you didn't know the camera was on and that I could see you crouched down in your closet with your microphone. It was amazing.
I was also doing my own podcast at the time with no video, and the sound is so good in the closet. So I was used to just being in there, but it was in fact the bottom of my closet. And at the end, you were like, it was so good to see you. And I was like, wait a second, we've been seeing each other. It's been so good to be seen. So I opted just for a microphone in my office. So any sacrifice in audio quality comes at, the cost of not having to see my shoes in the backdrop.
Oh, I thought it was great. And the look on your face because I didn't even think about it. I thought, hey, I get it. That's what they say, right? It's the best place in your closet full of clothes. It's the best audio. So I was like, I totally get it. And then you were like, wait, what?
Yeah. So look how put together we both look right now.
We have upgraded. This is an improvement. Yeah. Well, I feel like you were talking about empathy like before empathy was a thing or before it was cool. How long have you been talking about this and really understanding that this is a big, huge part of leadership?
Handle with Care Consulting began about 7 years ago. And what you're saying is true. Not that the need for empathy and human-centric skills, in contrast to what we sometimes call soft skills. They're not soft. They're for anyone who deals with other humans. It's always been a huge need in people's lives, in people's workplaces. But I can remember, going back to 2019, 2018, where I was the only person on any conference agenda that had words like empathy. And I bless and am so encouraged by more and more people talking about these matters. It just goes to show that it's one of the most interesting and impactful fields of management studies and will continue to be in the foreseeable future.
Mm-hmm. And why is it so important that we start looking at this and really figuring out how can we not only share it with our teams, but
how can we get organizations on board of knowing that this is crucial?
Well, we've all lived through the COVID pandemic, which was like a wide scale use case. When I use the term disruptive life events, the things that can seem like they just come out of nowhere and they catch you off guard and they just throw everything into a tizzy. But really, the reality is anyone who has lived within a family or an organization for any amount of time knows that you can't predict what is going to happen or when it's going to happen for a given individual, but it's the deepest reality that we all exist within, right? People are going to get sick. People are going to die. Bad things are going to happen. And specifically why it's impactful now. I mean, I can't speak to the whole field. I think something that really helps about the way I facilitate at Handle with Care Consulting is I like taking it from the realm of the conceptual, like this is a personality-based trait that some people have and some people don't, and instead really breaking it down into skills-based competencies that we all can and should be growing in. And I think that that pivot, which the best practitioners are doing, really allows for learning to happen because it's not foundationally helpful to be like, be more empathetic. And people are like, I don't know how to do that. Like, you can
Right. What
tell
does that
me,
mean?
what does that mean? Especially if you have felt and experienced either other people telling you you're not good at it, or you yourself know what it's like to be in moments and be like, I think I really messed that up, but I'm not sure how to do it differently. And that partners with the fact that we tend to be a grief adverse society. You know, we avoid difficult moments. And so it all just piles on.
Yeah. Well, that's such a good point too, because I know in my own personal experience before I went through your Empathy at Work workshop, which by the way, I still have my book from there, my workbook.
Oh,
Yeah, I still
good.
have it. I keep it at my desk all the time
That's why we print
because
it on sturdy paper.
that's right. Now it might have a little coffee on it, but that's because it sits out. And just to try and catch yourself and just make sure that it's at the forefront. Um, because I think a lot of times, and I definitely experienced this, where something, someone's going through a hard time, and I just this phrase, I'm not sure what to do or what to say, keeps coming up. Like, I don't know what to say in these moments. I don't know
Right.
what to do in these moments. So then we do nothing.
Yes. Or we reach for these tools in our empathy toolkit that really don't serve us, but they're just the trusty tools that we have because we all come to these situations by bent of personality or household of origin or just the first thing somebody said to us at our first funeral. And we think that's just what you're supposed to do. And so, we come with the trite cliche of like, God just needed another angel, or it's always darkest before the dawn, or we lose ourselves in task mode and go into just a fix it Frank or a buck up Bobby. And it's bringing awareness to the things that we do by default and to say, if that's not actually getting you where your best intentions want to go, or even just the utility of being helpful to the other person, what are better tools to put in your toolkit?
Yeah, it's so good going through that workshop and really, because you can see yourself, you have these empathy avatars that you have in the workbook, and you can really see yourself in those different avatars or those different characters and how they play out at different times. And I remember, again, one of our first conversations, you were going through something at that time outside of moving. And my immediate thing was, oh, yeah, I experienced this too. And this is what happened in my instance. We feel like that's a good thing because we're trying to connect with that person. Like, I see you, I understand you, I can, feel that too. And we start to share our own story, and you're like, there's maybe a better way to do that.
Well, and, the foundation of learning about these things isn't to tie people up in knots and to be like, oh no, I'm the worst, but just to see some of the ripple effects. So what you're describing is a move of people who want to be helpful. In the language of empathy avatars, as you mentioned at the beginning, this is the commiserating Candace movement, where it's usually people who have been through something hard. They like to connect. In full disclosure, of all the avatars, this is one of the two that I gravitate most towards. It's people who are verbal, but it inadvertently centers you in the story, because then the other person is like, oh, I guess I'm caring about your story now. Or they run the risk of feeling like a jerk because they're not acknowledging what you've said. And really the upskilling for that personality type, for people like me who are prone to doing that, is it is at this point, it's an almost audible voice in my head that says, Liesel, it's still not your time to talk. It's still not your time to talk, because I want to jump in all the time. I try to really give the other person's story some space to breathe. And then at the end of the interaction, because anyone who is prone to this knows, well, sometimes it really does unlock connection and it really is helpful. Save that shared experience for the end of the encounter. And then you can say, if you ever want to talk, my son was recently hospitalized with something similar just a couple of years ago. It can be a lot. Then it lands as invitation and not demand. The other person can take you up on it if they want to, or not at all. So yes, it happens to the best of us.
Well, so that's kind of one of maybe a personal blind spot, right? I think I kind of look at it that way of, oh, okay, I didn't realize I'm thinking I'm connecting, but actually what I'm not seeing is one, that person, as you said, might feel like, oh, well, okay, I get so okay, attention's on you now when I was sharing and sort of hurting. But then also I feel like it could minimize or make them feel like you're minimizing, like, oh, okay, that's not that big of a deal because I've experienced it. A lot of people have. So that's kind of on that personal. Where do you see still, you've been doing this work for 7+ years. Where do you see organizations as a whole or leaders, like where are their blind spots when it comes to empathy that we're still kind of seeing today?
A primary one, especially when you get into upper levels of leadership, is the fix it Frank modality. This is someone who, if you're going through something hard, they want to solve it. Have you tried this, or have you looked at that resource? Or maybe if you just do cold plunges twice a day, it'll just solve everything, which a good cold plunge can solve a lot, but maybe not
Yeah.
everything. And what I find, especially when I do training sessions that are executive focused, almost to a person in the room, people identify with Fix It Frank or Fix It Francine energy, because we like to promote people on this capacity. If you can get stuff done, we love that trait at work. So you get elevated and esteemed for that. And it's a great capacity. It's just when it's over deployed in these situations, it really leaves people feeling like, I'm not some problem to be solved. You are missing the human element. And a good, I'm all about having actionable ways to help shift behavior patterns, is really just asking in those moments. If someone is going through a disruptive life event, you know that you are prone to fix it energy, and you're right on the edge. As I said, the Fix It Frank is the other avatar that I really gravitate towards, because I'm like, I have such good ideas. Why
Can
doesn't someone
help.
want to hear it right now? And when I feel that temptation of like, I've got a great idea this very moment, pausing to say, hey, would it be most helpful for me just to listen right now or to troubleshoot? And just the more you get the reps in of saying it and people believe that you're actually flexible enough, like they'll say things like, you know what, I just need to get it off my chest for a minute or two, and then we can move to what's next. This is also just a bit of a bonus suggestion. Oftentimes these fix it types, there's a classic trajectory in organizations where if you're good at your job, you become a manager. And certainly you should know how to do the job, because once upon a time you had a manager. We really under-resource managers. And so they know how to do the job they came out of. they can go into this fix-it mode, especially with the people underneath them. Just be like, well, what you need to do is blah, 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 blah. Or they just take over. So they either take over the task or they just tell everyone what they need to do. And if you, again, over deploy that, it leaves the people underneath you really not developing their own problem-solving capacity. So another disruptive question for these types, especially as it relates to management styles, is before you jump in with your great idea or what you need to do, what that person who's having the problem needs to do, to really ask, what do you think a good next step would be? That opens up their own problem-solving capacities. Perhaps they have great ideas that you haven't even looked at. So just beginning to ask that question more frequently is really helpful.
Yeah, maybe my great idea is a great idea, but there are also other great ideas that we can open up and explore. So you were talking about like when we do know when something's going on with someone, but often in some cases, we're not even getting to the point where we know that one of our employees or someone, on our team is going through a hard time. I think a little bit we're still stuck in the leave your problems at home, don't bring your problems to work type thing. So if I'm a new leader or I aspire to be a great leader, what are some things that I can do or ways where I'm making sure that I'm touching those employees and really letting them know, hey, it's okay if you're having a bit harder day or if you're going through something, we can work on that as a team, even at work.
That's a great question. I have a couple of specific tips, but I just want to acknowledge when it comes to sharing about life outside of work, that's not something we can ever demand from our people. It's not a part of the job. It's predicated on trust and relationship that's built. And frankly, if people try to make a hard pivot and be like, share with me all about your life now, people will be like, are you kidding me?
What?
And also, there are certain identities, be that, across any range of just the realities that people inhabit, where showing up as their full selves at work has been really used against them. It's been dangerous. It's been weaponized. Like there are all kinds of reasons why people might want to step back from that a little bit. So just tonally, and in the leader's mind, it's not something that like, we're doing this now and why won't you share? You got to give, in fact, at any session I say, you're always invited to share, but never demanded. There might be questions or reflections that you're not quite ready to give voice to. But when we get back to what creates the space where people would be willing to share, and that willingness to share actually really is very important, because getting better information helps you as a leader do a better job. So how do you start? Some people will come to my sessions and they're like, okay, I like this. I want more of it. I don't even know where to start, because my team, we tend to deal with each other on the level of deliverables more than anything. We're talking inefficiencies. Maybe I know who so-and-so's favorite sport team is, or that they watched the last season of Severance, but I really don't know more. The stoplight check-in is a really low barrier way to begin the conversation about, hey, I don't just care only about if you finish the report, but how everyone's showing up. So the way that the stoplight check-in works, again, easy to deploy, easy to use, is at the beginning of team meetings, at the beginning of one-on-ones. I was just doing this on a call with my executive assistant right before this meeting. What energy are you bringing to today's session? I was yellow, tending towards green, because I was talking prom details with my teenager this morning, and it was kind of a lot to deal with. And you rate the energy through the lens of a stoplight. Green, you're ready to go, you're feeling good. Yellow, you've got some things humming in the background that have maybe taken some of your bandwidth. Red, you've shown up and it's hard. So helps get you better information. It cues up meaningful follow-up. If someone says they're yellow or they're red, maybe that's a good indicator, especially if you're in a leadership position, to follow up after the meeting, not in the middle of it all. if they don't want to share, hey, you shared you were yellow or red. Do we need to shift any tasks? Is there any way I can help you? It also, especially if you are on top of a power dynamic, is a great way to introduce more of your life outside of work. You notice when I mentioned my color, I mentioned about my daughter and prom. Maybe if I am in a different meeting, I would say something like, I'm yellow. We have been driving all around, 465 in Indianapolis to so many lacrosse games because I've got 3 kids in spring sports and it feels like a part-time job.
Right.
And what that introduces to people is like, it's okay to acknowledge those things at work. It's okay to name them. And sometimes it's great stuff. Sometimes it's, I'm green. I went to my sister's baby shower. We're so excited. But that is building up that level of trust and knowingness that when something really hard does come up, people don't think, oh my gosh, I could never imagine telling anyone. They have just a rich foundation of knowingness and trust that they can resource.
Yeah, I love that. I heard you speak at a former company and you introduced this concept, and it was something that spread like wildfire because it was this really great way to just get in touch. And as you said, so thank you for pointing out too that, okay, we don't have to go so extreme the other way too, where it's like, oh, all we're talking about are things that are going on in your personal life and everybody has to share. And if you don't share, then, you feel like an outsider in the team. That's not the point of it. So I think this is so great. It leans into giving that opportunity. And as you said, somebody can maybe go a little more personal if that's how they're feeling and they're comfortable, or they can kind of keep it light. Like, I'm yellow because I've got a lot of projects that are due and the time frame is, daunting. So, yeah, right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I love that. It's such a great way to kick off meetings and really get a handle on where people are. And
Could I add one more?
of
You
course.
kind of asked about just a culture and how do we make this movement within teams. I think it's also really helpful, and we do this oftentimes in session in the workshops that I'm doing. There can be this sense like when you're at a certain point in your career, you're insulated by your position or by your salary, of thinking that you're almost like immune to bad things happening. But the reality is, for almost anyone listening, you have experienced some level of a disruptive life event to this point in life. A partner losing their job, struggles with getting pregnant, a disruptive diagnosis, a parent dying while you were working. For me, in my story, it was a daughter dying when I was in my MBA program, or a son having open heart surgery. Those are both things that profoundly shape why I show up in this work the way that I do. Having people pause and think, when was the time that you needed support at work? Did you get that support? How was that helpful? Sometimes people will tell stories of like, you know what, I just was at my wit's end and I had a manager who was so good and they just walked with me each step along the way and I'll never forget that organization. Or other people are like, I got nothing. I had to show, the brochure of the funeral. I got
Right.
2 days. And just having people think like, what is the lived experience of how you've encountered that? Do you want to keep perpetuating something like that? Or what is a better way to equip people? Because when it happens to somebody else, sometimes it's just so distant. So how it gets back to organizationally, I think especially sometimes we'll do audits of internal policies and procedures, and people are instituting a new way of doing things. And to have some leadership champions who are willing to talk about, like, I can remember early on, so the VP level person is sharing, I remember early on in my career, my mom died suddenly of a heart attack. And I can just remember I was mid level sales director, and my boss was just the best. They consistently cared for me all along the way, but I realized not everybody has that experience. that's one of the reasons that we are putting these new changes into place. We're updating our procedures. We're giving people training, because that's the kind of place we want to be consistently every time, a place that gives care when it matters most. Because lots of times the demands for care come from the bottom, and it's like other people are in an ivory tower, when you can really signal from the top, not just like we're doing the thing, but I understand and I'm leading the charge because I have been where you are. It really conveys something. It powerfully gives permission to talk about those things in ways that matter.
Mm. And that brings up a good point, because you can be in the same organization, but if I move supervisors from supervisor to supervisor, it can still look different of how
Yes.
that supervisor handles it based on the training that they have.
Right.
And, are they following the procedures that that organization has set in place? So we can have the best intentions as an overall organization, but it has to get down to those supervisors across the board. Otherwise, we're still not a company that's really showing this, right?
Right. I have clients in the US and internationally, and I was speaking to a German CEO that I worked with. Right now, it's spring of 2025 when we're recording. And his observation, he said, the middle managers have left the building. And this ties in well with recent Gallup numbers that were just released that showed the greatest drop in overall work satisfaction was in middle managers. Um, they were they were really, like, just in their percentage numbers, I think it was maybe 30 to 27%. From 30% I'm engaged with work to 27%, they'd seen a year-over-year drop from 2023 to 2024, which has really, I'm developing session materials right now. Yes, middle managers are so important, but oftentimes it's also so scattershot. Like, whose responsibility is it to care for the middle managers? Who's pouring into them? And that is so randomly dispersed across organizations. Sometimes it's already distracted VPs who have 12 other things on their plate, or it is the HR person who has to do that. So really thinking not just, wow, we want our supervisors to be good in this, but how are we equipping them to be good in this? Not just crossing our fingers and hoping for the best because they got a training and we don't have to care for them, but they got a training and should be able to care for everyone else.
Mm-hmm. That's also such a good point, because everyone in HR can be really hip to this. They can be really good about it, but they don't always know. Like, sometimes
Right?
that doesn't trickle to your HR department. So you can't necessarily rely on them. You have to train the individuals.
Democratizing the skill set of empathy and care is language that I like to use. Let's not just have it live in one or two gifted individuals or a particular department. How do we democratize the skill set so everybody has a basic equipping to be able to show up?
Mm-hmm. So you touched on briefly your daughter who
Mm-hmm.
passed away, and you're such a leader in this space that most probably know your story. But if you don't mind, is that how you got in this space, or were you already interested in this and then you went through that event and, this life-changing experience, and then it kind of catapulted? Do you mind sharing that
Yeah.
story?
Yes, I will. I'll share about Mercy Joan in a moment, but just the wider context. When our daughter died, I was in an MBA program. I was maybe 27 or 28, but I've always been fairly observational, partnered with being both a talker and a learner all at once. So I can look back and see how I was a student of myself in human interaction. So I'll give you an example that predates Mercy Joan and her death. I'm back from college. It was maybe my first year back. So you come back knowing so much and living again with your parents. And I'm driving with my mom, and she was serving on a board of this nonprofit organization that was going very, very poorly. So she's telling me just how bad the last board meeting was, and it's all falling apart. And I jump right in with all of these suggestions of, well, what about this? And have you tried talking to blah, blah, blah? And I get maybe 45 seconds with my great ideas. And I look over and she is totally quiet with just tears streaming down her face, and didn't talk to me for the rest of the way home. And I remember even at the time being like, that went really badly. Like that went really badly, and just mulling it over, like what happened and why in my head. And I thought, you know what? I really care for her, but I don't think she knew I cared for her. So I remember even that break, as I was talking about those things, I made like a mental note to then change, being like, before I give any suggestions, I need to let her know that I care for her and I hear her, and then I'll make the suggestions. So I remember even at like, it seems like, and it's a pretty profound revelation, but I was like, note to self, that was terrible. Do something different in the future.
Yeah,
So
that did not go over well.
That did not go well. And I don't have to be a victim to it. I don't have to think like, I guess I'm just bad at this. It's like, I think I can do better. So fast forward to later on in life, when I was in an MBA program with 2 small children at home and pregnant with my third, not by purposed planning. This was a surprise a week after I'd said yes to business school. But I thought, I'm a very confident multitasker. It'll be fine. It'll go fine. But as things sometimes go, it was not all fine. And our daughter, Mercy Joan, who was born in the second semester of my first year, she lived for only 8 days. And then we buried her. It happened over spring break, right before and after. And it's so many things in the imprint of our family, in our wider story. It also, as it relates to the work I do, was, again, I have a certain capacity to like both observe it and live it. I was also like looking and being like, oh, I'm not doing okay. I've got a pretty big bandwidth, and I am not just ready to bounce back or be great. This is a substantial thing. And realizing that in my circle of professional support in this graduate program, some people were really helpful. Some people were really bad. And the context of being able to learn human-centric skills, this is actually a big focus of business school. I can remember we had a cohort that we walked through 2 years with, and I'm not going to name him. There was a guy in my cohort who was really bad with people. He just was. He was cocky. He was overbearing. Like, at 2 years later, he was much, much better because he had been in all these classes, and they made a very strong economic case. Like, if you get better at people, you will get more money and you will get promoted in the future. And he was like, I watched him grow and change because it was framed in a way that was accessible and tied to goals and metrics he cared about. And so there's an element of that also. You don't have to trust me. I mean, there are so many compelling case studies coming out and just hard numbers from Gallup and Business Solver and Forbes and Harvard Business Review that show if you are good at this, it is actually a long-term competitive advantage for your team, for your organization, for your professional longevity. And so coming out of that personal place, it also tied with just studying the landscape of work. When I launched Handle with Care about 7.5 years ago, I mean, it started from that place of having gone through something. And when you've gone through something, people will tell you their hard stories too. So I knew a lot of people, I still have the notes of like somebody who lost their dad. I was just inviting all kinds of people over for wine and desserts. I was like, come ready to talk about your stuff. Tell me, how were you supported? How are you not? Like, where did people drop the ball? I broke it out into men's night and a women's night, just trying to give like as comfortable of a space as possible. We did it a few times. And at the same time, I was meeting with HR directors anyone who would meet with me, I would come with a little baby carrot cake, homemade in a mason jar, like, thank you for taking the time. I'll buy you coffee. But also asking them, what do you resource when times are hard? How have you been trained in this? And putting those two things together. One, there's a big need. And two, there's really not a consistent equipping that's going on, led to where Handle with Care is.
So I'm curious, and I think this will really open up for people to see the importance of it. What did you need in that time that your daughter passed versus what you maybe got from people?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say by and large, I think one of the reasons that I'm able to do this work is because by and large, I had a really healthy support system of people. Like, I'm not teaching out of a whole bunch of impoverishment. Like, if only I would have had this, there are people who showed up for me with a lot of care. Um, People giving me space to just be in the messy middle was important. I think there can be a big imperative that people feel to be quickly like, I'm fine, it's okay. There's layering over if you come from a religious like background of being like, God is good all the time, and all the time God is good. And it was very important to me after Mercy died of being like, I'm not going to say something and pretend for people if I don't feel it. And people that just gave me a wide berth to not be suspicious of that or like, why aren't you better? Was just to say, and this is something that I equip people with, like, just acknowledging the hardness is actually really powerful. Like, it is really hard. It makes sense to me that you're still sad, to be able to give me that space. I was going through something hard in a very demanding stage of parenting my living children. So even socially, like, people who would take my children to the park, so I had a little bit of a break, was really meaningful. When you're going through something hard, you still need to eat. You probably don't feel like cooking. So, a low hanging fruit, if somebody's going through something hard, send them food. We got some great food that was delivered. DoorDash. Lasagna is a low hanging fruit. We got many a lasagna. If lasagna is what you can do, that's fine. If you can do more, think outside the lasagna. Also, I had a business school. We were paired with an advisor, and this advisor had an extra home in Tucson that she let us go to just for a week to get away. So they were all kinds of like really lovely in the moment. I had a bunch of business school classmates that came to the funeral. I didn't invite them to the funeral. They just knew the details and came up. Gail, who I was in this graduate program, she was the director of student services. She helped navigate logistics for me with all of the professors. She asked, it's always important to ask first. She said, hey, would it be helpful if I just sent out an email to all of your professors for next term, letting them know what happened? And I thought, I didn't even know that I wanted, but yes, please do that. And all of those things are examples of people thinking, like, what can I specifically offer that would be helpful? And making that offer in ways that mattered. One additional note, it's not that people always show up for grief in the short term. There are many people who turn away or don't come, but people even more so forget about grief in the long term. So I always appreciate, the people that were still checking in, 6 months later, on the anniversary of her death. I have become someone who writes things down. I have from over the weekend. There's a mom that I knew from 8 years ago who this weekend marked the anniversary of her child's death. And I have a running note each year. Just, I want to be the person that remembers him with her. And even as you listen to this, I'm actually 2 days late on remembering his birthday, even though it's in my phone. But I'm not going to be ashamed of myself or just let it slip by. I'm going to write something like, Erica, I am remembering him with you. I'm sorry I didn't reach out on Saturday, but I want to let you know that he's on my mind, because there's not a wrong time to do a good thing.
Yes. You talking about, thank you for
Yeah.
sharing a bit of your story with us too. You talking about kind of the long term. And
Mm,
I definitely remember how important this was to me when my father passed away. Everybody's there in those first few days because that's, it's hectic and people are trying to help you and doing all of those wonderful things. And then it's kind of like when it's over and the dust settles, of course, people go back to their normal lives. And then you're
mm,
kind of sitting there with like, oh, and now almost when you need it more so in a
yeah.
way of because now things are calm and now your mind is starting to think. And so I had a friend, I mean, she called me consistently
Mm,
after my father's funeral and
yeah.
just checked in on me and made sure. And it was such a, I mean, I looked forward to it almost like and
Yeah.
felt like, oh, she called just at the right time after that. So I think that that's great that you brought that up and the importance of kind of keeping track and being there for those people
Mm.
far beyond the immediate.
Well, and any listener, you can hear in your voice like you remembered that. It made an impact, and that's where, this is business focused podcast, but you don't have to. This disruptive life events are keystone moments where people can decide, like, I didn't like working here anyway. I am definitely looking for the next thing. Or they are moments where you have so lived your values. I mean, I we do an annual event each year with some live trainings. Sometimes we do it more than once a year, but last year we did one in October of 2024, and the sponsoring organization, you know, the CEO shared, and he talked about losing a daughter to miscarriage, his first early on in his career, and just a big law firm. You would not expect like touchy feely sort of a place. He's called in to the big boss's room. He was like, it's a wonderful life. I was in the little chair, big boss was in the big chair, and I thought he's gonna fire me. Like, I've just come back because this performance driven. And sure enough, the boss starts out and he's like, you have come back too soon. We all agree you're here too soon. And he's like, what's going to happen? And he goes, and the man slid across the table this travel voucher. He was like, we have all taken up a collection. You need to take your wife, get out of town, take the time you need. And, Jeff went on to talk about, he said, headhunters call, he had a long career with this law firm, 30 plus years. He said, headhunters called people. He goes, there were many reasons that I stayed, but it was certainly related to also how well they showed up for me. Just the long-term impact is huge.
Mm. Yeah, it's almost like no amount of, the insurance costing this much or
Yeah,
company outings or those types of things. It does go back to really remembering when I was going through the hard times, they
right.
made it so easy for me or made it, to where I didn't have to think about that. Or as you mentioned, like, I don't have to wear this badge that I'm okay, everything's fine, just get back to work type
Right.
thing. Yeah. So good. Okay, Liesel, I have one last question for you. I
Mm.
always like to try to share a power move with people, like their power move for the week. So, as it pertains to empathy, what is a power move that someone listening to this podcast could do this week?
Make a note in your calendar around major U.S. holidays: Christmas, Thanksgiving, Father's Day, and Mother's Day. Abbreviate it RO for reach out. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but you just leave it in there. And throughout the year, as you have clients, as you have coworkers, as you have people that those days are going to feel like the volume is turned up, that you're someone who's going to remember to reach out to them. That's what that RO is for. Reach out to them with a note, a text, whatever seems congruent to the relationship. Just, I'm thinking of you. I imagine this is a hard day. I know it's your first year without, but anything that matters to us shows up or does not in our calendar. And it does not cheapen empathy to plan for it. It elevates it. So just drop those notes in your calendar.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
What a great power move and tip. I appreciate you being here on Lead Without Limits. Thank you so much.
Good to be with you.
Thanks for tuning in to Lead Without Limits and investing in what matters, you. If you found this episode valuable, please share it with a friend or colleague who might benefit as well. This podcast is brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network, your trusted source for stories, trends, and insights in multifamily living. I hope this moved you one step closer to lead without fear, lead without doubt, and lead without limits.